Hello and welcome to my latest review slash comparison slash nostalgia trip, whatever. As I mentioned in my earlier video, we're going to be taking a look at two versions of an iconic Star Wars ship. Boba Fett's Slave One, one of my favourites in all of the saga. I mean, Boba Fett's just cool. So we're going to go through each one, discussing 5 main criteria: minifigs, design, playability, price, and my personal preference. So, without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Okay, so both sets came with a pretty good selection of minifigures. The 2006 Slave One, the one here on the left, came with 5 minifigures, whereas the 2010 Slave One came with just 4, depending on whether you want to count the Han Solo in Carbonite as a minifigure, of course. Both sets of minifigures have their strengths and weaknesses, so let's have a look at each individually and then I'll give you my thoughts on all of them afterwards. So these are the 5 original minifigures from the 2006 Slave One. We have, of course, Boba Fett, Dengar, Han Solo in Carbonite, a Bespin Guard, and IG-88. Boba Fett, naturally, is one of the most iconic Lego Star Wars figures ever made, particularly this incarnation with the slightly squared helmet and the bright green colouring. I mean, he is perfect. He may not look exactly like what he does in the films, but as a minifigure for nostalgia, he is perfect. Dengar, again, for 2006, does look really good. He is slightly problematic. I don't particularly like the clip on his back from his ninja headgear, which is supposed to be bandages. So I'm less keen on that. And he does have a very simple face. It's just the normal minifigure happy smiley face on quite a simple torso. But I think the headgear on him is really good and really does make it look like bandages with that white. The Han Solo in Carbonite, although being a classic, does now look quite dated. It's just a slightly silvered print on a black brick. By today's standards, it's quite poor. It's just such a nostalgia piece that I really like, but I think now it can be seen as probably objectively poor. So I'm sad to say that, but although I like it, I just don't think it's quite up to the standards we have today. The Bespin Guard, actually, I love. He is fantastic. The bright blue colouring of his uniform makes him really stand out. Again, he's got a very simple face. Although the torso printing is shiny gold on those edgings, it is quite simplistic. And in fact, it's not even properly printed. You can see bits where the print has overlapped into other bits of the print, and it's not even, and it looks quite rough when you're up really close. But the main thing about this Bespin Guard is he has arm printing. Now that's something you hardly ever see even nowadays. So for 2006, on a non-major minifigure, I mean that was groundbreaking. You'd have never seen that. That's astounding. We did get some arm and leg printing on Boba Fett in the 2003 Cloud City set, but that was like a £300 set. It was massively expensive with lots of very unique, rare minifigures. Whereas this is just a normal ship. There's nothing particularly special about this to warrant giving this guy printed arms. And you've got the return of the classic blue cap there, taken from the Imperial officers and the German soldiers from Indiana Jones. That has now, of course, changed. We now have a new hat piece. And lastly, we're up to IG-88. Simple build, he's just a battle droid, basically, but with a nice conical head. I like the fact that he's chrome silvered. Well, okay, he's not like chrome plated in chrome, but he's like, his pieces are silver, which I really like. And I prefer this version to the later version, which uses a printed brick as the head. I think the light orange stud, the way the light refracts through it, makes it look like it's actually glowing. So it gives him so much more personality compared to the dull, dead, printed eyes of the much later IG-88. We can also take a look at the more recent Bespin Guard. His printing is more refined. He doesn't have arm printing, which is a shame. But his hat's good. I like his new hat. I like his new hat piece. Don't know whether you can see it very well. There we go. Obviously none of these originals have rear face printing. This one does, but it's really bad because, I mean, you can just see everything underneath his hat. It's terrible. But at least he has actual back printing. And last but not least, before we move on to the 2010 minifigures, Dengar's 2016 counterpart is similar to his 2011 counterpart, just with a different torso print and bandage headgear thing. Actually, I prefer the 2006 Dengar. I prefer the all-encasing head moulded bandages rather than the printed on bandages with a little head cap. I also think that the design of the armour on the second one, on the 2016 one, is better. I think it's more well printed, but I don't like the fact that it's printed onto a white torso. If it had been printed onto something like a grey torso, I'd be much happier. I think the face printing is vastly improved on the 2016 one. But I wish they'd kept the headgear from him, so maybe if they'd have had the head from this one underneath some headgear like that, that would have looked fantastic. So we've now had a look at the minifigures from the 2006 Slave one. Let's move on and have a look at those from 2010. So the 2010 Slave one only came with 4 minifigures. One thing I will say as a disclaimer before any of you start commenting this, I bought the 2010 Slave 1 without any minifigures. I bought it on eBay. I bought it just as the ship. It didn't come with the minifigures. So these aren't the original minifigures. They're basically the same. The only difference is that the original one, Boba Fett didn't have any leg printing, and Bosk didn't have any leg printing. Other than that, they're the same minifigures. So that's just a quick disclaimer there. So when I'm talking about this, just ignore the printing on their legs, essentially. So the design of Boba Fett has changed significantly since 2006. Most notably, you'll see the helmet change. The helmet design has changed. It's now a singular piece that can be removed, and he now has a sort of jetpack that's attached around the neck, as opposed to the single moulded helmet and jetpack piece that we've been getting since the year 2000, up until 2010 obviously, with the black head underneath the helmet, which of course has the little slit in it that allows you to see the black head through the helmet. You'll see that the printing on the one on the left for the 2010 one again has greatly improved, even if we forget about that leg printing. It's a lot more detailed, truer in colour to the films. You'll see he's actually now got sort of sand blue elements to him that the old one doesn't. He's got a new antenna piece, which before was built into the rather square helmet of the 2006 one. He's now got a cape as well, very reminiscent of Clint Eastwood's characters that he used to play in old westerns like Good, Bad and the Ugly, from which Boba Fett actually took his original inspiration. So I think overall the printing and the actual design in terms of trueness to the films is much better from the 2010 Boba Fett. Bosk again looks fantastic. He's the same as he was in the 2010 one. This is the 2016 one, but he's basically the same. Fantastic head mold. It is plastic, it's not rubber. Very well painted, I must say, the same as the Boba Fett helmet and everything. It's sort of a shame that we didn't get Bosk in the 2006 Slave one, and likewise that we didn't get Dengar or someone in this one as well, just to bump up that minifigure count. Really good printing, great all-round minifigure. If you want a little bit of information, the flight suit that Bosk actually wears in the film is just a recycled prop suit, flight suit from one of the 1960s Doctor Who episodes. Just, there you go. And last but not least, we're going to have a look at the Han Solo minifigure. So he's got the classic little Han Solo face there. He hasn't got any like lines or jaw printing like he does now. It's much simpler. He's got his open shirt. Looks great. And of course fits the carbonite version of him that we see here. Now, this was a vast departure from the old Han Solo in carbonite, which was just printed onto a flat brick. This is now fully 3D moulded with Han Solo, much larger, much wider, and you can now take Han Solo and put him into the carbonite, like so, which is a really nice design feature. So again, for 2010, a really good selection of minifigures. Not that though. But I don't know whether they equal the 2006 minifigures. So you've now seen both sets of minifigures, and I've given my thoughts on each of them and I've compared them. And if you want me to give my true opinion, I think that the 2006 minifigures are the better minifigures. For one, you get more of them in the set. More of them are unique to the set, like the Bespin Guard and Dengar, whereas the 2010 ones, we only really got 3 minifigures, which were Boba Fett, Bosk and Han Solo, and Han Solo appeared in many other sets, along with the Boba Fett. Bosk less so, but he did appear in 2 other ones as well, those being the Bounty Hunter Battle Pack, which I did a review of a few months ago, and the Executor Star Destroyer. I think the quality of the printing and the pieces of the 2010 minifigures is vastly improved. I think they're fantastic, but I don't think anything quite beats the nostalgia of the 2006 minifigures. That 2006 Boba Fett will always be the quintessential Boba Fett minifigure to me. Nothing will ever change that. Yes, the 2010 one may be more accurate to the film, but he just doesn't have that instant nostalgia factor that this lovable minifigure has. Alrighty, so that was the minifigures. Let's go and actually have a look at the sets. So this is the 2006 Slave 1. First we're going to have a look at the design of the two. Both have very similar designs. There's barely any changes really to the actual structure. Not until we get to like 2015 and we get the UCS one, and we've now got a brand new one in 2019, which again has changed its appearance. But these two ships, going back all the way to 2002 to Jango Fett's Slave 1, have all remained very similar. There's been hardly any significant design changes. Obviously there are vast improvement on the 2000 Slave 1, which looked very rough. So I will give them that. They do look fantastic. They do give a really good sense of capturing what the ship should look like. One thing that you'll notice is that the design of this ship is very much brown and sand green, which is different to the 2010 one, which is dark red and dark green. In this set, the arches around the wing joints here are made of these curved plates, the same as these ones that appear down here, and they're stood up using some side panels, and then they've got this little hinged couple of pieces here just to finish off that sort of, it's supposed to be like a big domed arch over them. And for 2006, I think it's very similar to what they used in the 2002 Jango Fett Slave 1. It looks really good. I think it really gives that sort of arching feeling to it. You will also notice that the wings rotate, and along with the cockpit in the centre, that rotates with them, as you can see, and it will do that when you lift it up. It's on a centrifuge, so when you lift it up, there you go, the wings become horizontal, and so does the cockpit. There you go, so Boba Fett is always sat down. You'll notice also that there is a lack of printed pieces or stickers on this set, because back in 2006, stickers, although they were a thing, they weren't very prevalent, particularly in Star Wars sets. If you were going to get any designs, they'd usually be printed, like the interior of the cockpit here. It's got a couple of little printed pieces, but other than that, there's barely anything to the ship. Whereas the 2010 one has far more stickers all over it. As you can see, this 2010 one has a different colour scheme. It's dark green and dark red, as opposed to the brown and sand green. You'll notice that if I can just get them in together, you'll notice that this front top section here is now a different shape. It used to be made from roof slopes on the old one. Here it's more rounded. You'll notice the differences in the housing around the wing joints. Here it is a lot smoother, a lot more rounded, and is probably a lot more accurate to what it is like in the films. I still have a problem with both of them, that this bit down here is left very open. That's a problem I have with both of these sets. The actual wings themselves, in design, are quite similar. They're not identical, obviously, but they are very similar. They've just changed their colours from tan to grey. I think I prefer the tan. I think it just gives it a little bit more colour and pop to the ship, rather than it just being yet more grey Lego Star Wars. I also think the brown colouring is nicer to the eye, the light green and brown, as opposed to the really vivid dark red and dark green. Although the colouring on here is probably more accurate. You'll also, I'm sure, be noticing now that there are lots of little small design changes, particularly with the way these angled side panels work, and all along here, and the guns are all different. Underneath, they're also both very similar, except the one on the left, the 2006 one, has more of those engines, which personally I prefer. But there's an extra one in the middle on the one on the right with a hole there, and you'll see why that is when we come to the next section. You might also be able to see that in the 2006 one, the centre part is left open, and you can see all the way through to the other side of the ship, which isn't good. It makes it feel open and unfinished. Whereas if we have a look at the 2010 set, you'll see that underneath there it is completely filled in, which again is a lot better. Apart from being very dusty, because I haven't looked after this very well, you'll see that the two also have very different boarding ramps. The one on the left here, the 2006 one, has a lever just here which lifts up this piece, which allows you to put some bombs into here, and then if you lift it up, you can lift up the bottom, this piece here, the boarding ramp, and it'll drop the bombs out from a little flap under here, and it folds down again. Put those back in. So compare that to the 2010 one. All you get is instead a little ramp, like so, under which you can hide the carbonite Han Solo, and that's it. You'll also notice that the design inside here is a lot more complete compared to the design of the 2010 one, which feels very empty, and you can see all the rubber bands from the inner workings of it. And again, you can see the sort of blue and yellow workings, which really isn't a good job there from Lego. So in terms of the designs of both ships, both are really good. I like both of them. I think the one on the right, the 2010 set, is probably more accurate and has a better overall design to the 2006 one, giving it a really nice smooth piece to the housing around the flying wings. I also think some of the panelling, however, is better on the 2006 one. We have these panels which open up like so, which, yes, house rockets like this, which I'll get into in the next part, which open downwards, but I much prefer the much more streamlined, sleeker, properly hinged pieces, which give it a really sort of sleek design. The one on the right, because it sticks out much further from the side of the build, and it has these little clips up here which you're supposed to hold on to open them, but it makes it feel too bulky compared to the nice slimming, sleek, satisfying design of the 2006 set. So I think overall, in terms of actual design, I'm probably going to have to give it to the 2010 set. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at the playability of each set. I'm going to do each one individually. Both have very similar functions. Some have just had different tweaks. So both sets include a centrifuge in the center, which allows the wings to fall flat and the cockpit to rotate like so when the build is lifted into a vertical position, which is a really nice design. The other main features of the 2006 Slave one include a fantastic, massive, like, rubber bullet. No, not that sort of rubber bullet. So by flicking this little handle on the side here, no, it didn't really work very well, but basically it's one of those. We've all seen these before. And essentially it just slots into the front here. Push on the little trigger and it shoots out, which is a really nice design. It's very satisfying. It's because it's really big and bulky, and it makes it feel like it could potentially do quite a lot of damage to any nearby enemy ships, if you like. The next thing we've got going along is the side panels, which are very satisfying to open. And all they contain really is it's a little angled plate with a rocket attached to it. The rockets don't fire. You can pull them off and then shoot them at whatever you want. But compared to the 2010 design, which you'll see in a minute, these are much more simplistic. And of course you get one on each side, and they both fold back into a nice, sleek design. You then get a little door here, a little car door, which is a little compartment. And in here, if we fold it down, you'll see in the bottom there, there's a little blaster, or the two pieces of a blaster, on a little hinge, and those can fold back up. So you've got an extra two blasters in the middle of the set there. And then of course you've got these rotating blaster cannons, which are really nice. I like the designs for them. They're a bit simplistic. They use these classic Star Wars gun pieces that we've had for 20 years, but they do their job. They look really good. In terms of playability, we also see on each side of the set a little compartment which opens up, but there's nothing in there, and it never came with anything to put in there either. The other main play feature though is, hold on, to do with the Han Solo and Carbonite, much like the 2010 one, which I showed earlier. If we spin this around here, what we have is a little lever here on the left hand side, which is nicely integrated, both of them actually, into the design of the ship. They do look like they belong there. They're not obtrusive. They look very sleek, very nice. So we've got a little ramp here, which is the boarding ramp, and I think it looks a lot a lot better than the 2010 one. So all we do, we take the Han Solo in carbonite, we put him under, just slide him in there. It's a bit fiddly, but you just slide him in like so, and he rests like that. Okay, so we have Han Solo here, and all we've got to do is turn the little lever, and he goes up into the hold, and it looks really good, and it looks sort of like you've got a door at the bottom of the hold and everything, and it means you can pretend to sort of open it down and have Boba Fett walk out if you want. I think it's a really nice design. It also means that when you lift it up, there's a little hole in here which you can put some bombs into, and then when you tilt the thing, as I've already shown you, the bombs drop out underneath. There's a little hole, as you can see here, that basically it just drops down onto this flat plate here, and then they roll out when you tilt it. Put the bombs back underneath and put it down. So that was the playability for the 2006 Slave 1. Let's go and have a look at the 2010 one. So the 2010 Slave 1 has very similar designs and playability features to the 2006 one, to the point where they're basically just the same playability features, but just done slightly differently and improved in places. So we still have the good old centrifuge, as you can see from there, and that moves the cockpit in the centre, and you'll see the beginnings of the new feature that it has compared to the 2006 one. So if we open up our two centre hatches, and incidentally this piece along here, because this uses 4 studs for these side bricks as opposed to just cutting it off here and having it as 2 in the 2006, it feels bulky here. It feels too wide, and then there's too much of like a step in, whereas I think the 2006 one made that join smoother. So let's actually take a look at what's going on here. So what you can see is that we have a joystick or something here. Underneath the joystick we have a Technic bar with lots of little flick fire missiles in it. Around the back, I mentioned that we had this little button. All it is that's a little button that when you push it in, there's a little another blue and yellow Technic piece at the back, and that pushes forward and essentially pushes on this bottom one here. And once this one has come out, the Technic pin can drop down and you can get like a rapid fire, flick fire missile. So I'm just going to push it in and it drops down, and then you can push out another one and there, which I think works very nicely. I think they could have hidden the blue and yellow better, if I'm honest. It doesn't look great with all that blue and yellow there. But I do prefer the big, chunky, proper missile from the 2006 set. These I think would be more akin to Jango Fett's Slave 1, where he has all those missiles and everything. But because we don't actually see any of the weapons used on Boba Fett's Slave 1, we don't actually know what he has in his ship's arsenal. But I prefer the big, hefty rubber bullet compared to this design. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a nice design, but I think it does also leave the back of the ship open, and you can see through to the back of the ship, and it makes it, again, it also feel empty and the cockpit to feel incomplete. We can go ahead and, of course, reload it by lifting up the Technic piece and slotting, hands in the way, but tough, I can't really do it any other way, and slotting the flickfire missiles back in there like so. Now, unlike the 2006 one where you could just flick the little switch and it would blast out through the doors here, these, because they have no weight to them, they can't do that, so you have to physically open them up before you can fire them. The next difference that we will see are these side panels. These flip down, they're not as satisfying as the other ones, but they open downwards rather than upwards, and they fall flasher against the ship when they're open, which I guess is a plus. You'll see that we get another flick-fire missile, and I really like the mechanism that allows you to take it out, because it doesn't just open out and then you fire it. It comes out to there, and then you flip it down, and it opens like so. So let's watch that again. That was beautiful. Really smooth transition there. Does mean, however, that you can only fire these when you're in vertical flight mode, if you will, because otherwise they'd just be shooting straight up. So, but you do have a bit of movement on them. You can move them to a lot of different positions if you really wanted to. But I think the actual design of the rockets and the way they come out, I think is a really just nice design. And of course you get one out of each side. That's what they look like when you see them front on. They just do a really nice job. They look really good, and they sort of do look like what they look like in the films on Jango Fett's Slave 1. And of course it's a flick-fire missile, so you just give it a flick and it should... Ow, that hit me in the face. And then of course that can then go back inside and be covered up like so. Moving on, we also get another weapons cache, again using the same little door piece. And if we open it up, we no longer get two little blasters on a hinge. Instead, we get a little box. And if we open it up, there's a blaster and a lightsaber, but just put them together and you get Boba Fett's E3 blaster or whatever it's called. So it's nice that they actually give you some weapons again to put in here, but it's nice that they come in a little box rather than just being on a hinge, and which you can take in and out, and that just gives it an extra little bit of playability. The blasters, again, are very similar. They're more brick built this time, with a more accurate design to the films. They've got these pieces on the end, but other than that, they're basically the same overall design. And then when we come down slightly, we have yet another little hatch in the same place as the original. This isn't as flush to the side. This does stick out. I'm not as keen on it. If we open it up, ooh, what have I got in there? Is that? Oh, it's Boba Fett's head. I forgot I had that in there. Okay, that's not creepy at all. And if we flip it over on the other side, you don't have anything in there, it's just a stud. One thing I will say is that it's not symmetrical, because in the film, the patterns on this ship are a bit more like, well, I don't think they're camouflage. I think it's just the fact that it's so beaten up that you get all the exposed metal showing through in just random places. So I like the fact that on this one, you've got this sort of thing going on here on this side, whereas on this side is a lot more streamlined. You've got this piece. It just adds a little bit of... and again here on the front, you can see that the dark green pieces are not symmetrical. It does give it an uneven quality. And if we have a look at our last major play feature, you will see that the boarding ramp is very different to the 2006 one. I don't think it fits properly. I feel like this should be lower down. It feels like this is too high and too steep, but that's just me. And you can see up in the top here, they have left like a little doorway that I suppose you could use for Boba Fett as like a doorway into the ship. But I prefer the 2006 one, which gives you the playability of allowing you to open and close the actual boarding ramp. Because it still gives you, the other one, the 2006 one, the ability to open and close this. But then it just looks terrible, to be honest. It looks awful if you do that. And naturally, this only opens up like this so that you can put Han Solo in there and then close it down in the hold. But I think the way the 2006 one does it is a much better design for a similar feature. So Boba Fett's 2006 Slave 1 feels more streamlined here. This feels more like it's part of the body. And then you've got the little ramp here, which of course can flip up. And it doesn't have any detriment to the set. In fact, it looks really good because it feels like it's an actual door that can open up and down. And yes, I know in the film the door is just a little door that goes... But I like this idea, and I like the fact that that's also the way of putting your Han Solo in the hold, and it does feel like he's, again, in the ship. And it gives you a secondary playability as well in the fact that you can drop bombs from it, whereas this one, it only really has one play feature, and all it is a storage compartment. And I don't think it looks as good. In fact, the way these are actually attached onto the bottom of here is very flimsy, and it just feels poorly made. It doesn't feel like it fits properly, whereas this feels nice and integrated into the design of the ship. So those were the play features on both the 2006 and 2010 versions of the Slave 1. I think I'm going to have to just about give the playability to the 2010 one, because they're both very even. The 2006 one has this really nice, big, hefty missile and can drop bombs from the hull, which this one can't. But the 2010 one has nicer flick-fire rockets and storage compartments in here, compared to the 2006 one, which just has some stick-on rockets that don't actually fire. I'm less pleased with the boarding ramp on the 2010 to the 2006, but I think if I'm going to be brutal, I think I'm going to have to give it to the 2010 one to make a decision. I mean, ideally I would give 1.2 each, but I think I'm just going to have to edge it over to the 2010 design. Okay, so now we're looking at the retail price of both of the ships. The one on the left in 2006 cost $49.99, whereas the one on the right cost in 2010 $79.99. That's £30 more than the one on the left. And do you think it's worth it? But, of course, what you have to bear in mind is that those were 2006 prices before the financial crisis. So you're also going to have to bear in mind inflation. And accounting for inflation, £50 in 2006 is £71 in 2019. So that means in today's money, this would actually be worth and sold for £71, whereas the one on the right would be sold for £79.99. So call it 71 and 80. £9 difference. So you're paying you're paying about £10 more for this one, which is a slightly more, I guess, refined design with a few more new pieces, which is just about acceptable. I also think that £70 to £80 for both of these sets, you know, if we're talking in today's money, is a lot for what they are. I would much rather pay something like £50 for these two, which is what I think they're probably more worth. You know, and of course their prices only go up. The 2006 one is now currently in 2019 money worth £70, £80, £90, £100. The 2010 one is worth £100, £110, £120, even more in some cases. So both haven't lost value, they've both put value on, which is really good. But one thing I will tell you is that I got both of these, obviously, at reduced prices. The one on the right I got without the minifigures, as I mentioned earlier in the review, and without the box, and without the instructions. I just bought the pieces, essentially. So that cut the price down. I think I got it for about... Bear in mind, I only got it about the year after it came out, so it's still quite expensive. I think I got it for about 60 quid, which was quite a lot of money for me back in 2011. I was 10 years old. and I spent 60 quid on this. However, my 2006 Slave One, which I bought last week, got delivered last week while I was on holiday, that is one of the best bargains I think I have ever made. I found this on eBay with its box, all of its minifigures, all of its instructions, everything, 100% complete. Actually, no, having said that, there were a couple of pieces that were missing, but they were really minor. They were like the little cone on here and stuff. It was minor, but I had all the pieces anyway, so I could just quickly replace them. Even though it did say 100% complete on the description. So
it's treason, then.
I got this with all of its box and everything for $29.99 on eBay. I don't know what the person selling it was thinking. I mean, it's worth 3 times that. So that's an absolute steal. So in terms of like my price, that one obviously wins. That one is by far and away the winner in this competition in terms of price. But if we're going by retail price, then it'll also win because it was cheaper, $71 compared to $79.99. And if we compare it to the current retail price, because both of them are now retired, the 2010 one is more expensive. It has held its value more compared to the 2006 one, even though I think the 2006 set is more collectible. So in terms of price, I'm certainly going to have to give this to the 2006 Slave One. Okay, so now you've got to undergo my own personal opinion of each set. While I think that the 2010 one was a step forward in terms of design and quality, I think that the 2006 one, in terms of its colour scheme and its nostalgia factor, especially along with the amount of minifigures and the quality behind them and the nostalgia factor that they come with compared to the 2010 minifigures, I think that yes, the 2010 set is a great set, don't get me wrong. However, for me, it doesn't come quite close enough to the 2006 Slave One for it to win this test. So, from my personal opinion, I prefer the 2006 Slave One. So if we go ahead and count up all the scores on the doors, we will find that the 2010 Slave One scored 2 out of the 5 categories in design and playability. The 2006 Slave One scored 3 out of the 5 categories in minifigures, price and personal preference. That means that the 2006 Slave One is the victor in this comparison. You can check out my latest video here on the right, or a playlist of my Micromock series here on the left. If you like what you see here, press the orb in the middle to subscribe. And don't forget to check out my Flickr page to see photos of all my Micromocks that are not up on my channel yet. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in another video.